the long and varied history of the Charger name, there have been several different models that have been produced, often completely different from each other. And in the 80s, the Dodge Charger was produced, which is the car we're looking at here. So the 83 to 87 Dodge Charger is based off of the L platform, which is not to be confused with the Dodge Omni or a Plymouth Horizon, which also share the same platform. When it was announced in 88 that Dodge would stop producing the Charger, Shelby went ahead and then they bought 1,000 of these units to go ahead and soup up. Now, you don't want to get this mixed up with the 86 Dodge Omni, which has a very similar performance, package and systems, but the chassis in the year is completely different. In 86, they did 500 Omnis, and then in 87, which is the only year this is available, they made 1,000 of these. And Shelby used the same exact idea that he had with the Omnis and just applied it to this platform. So performance-wise and everything, they're pretty similar. It's mainly just going to be body panels, obviously. Now, you didn't really get a whole lot of options with these. They were all black. There was a couple that came painted from the dealer when they were trying to unload them, but other than that, that's the only really, quote-unquote factory color that was available was this black. They all had leather-wrapped steering wheels. They all had sunroofs, came with AC, and it came with power steering, which is all nice. And then obviously performance-wise, it came with the upgrades over if you bought the base Charger. Also important to note is that Coney struts and shocks all the way around, so you could adjust it to different environments depending, what use you were going to have with it. One interesting thing about it too is the speedometer typically only goes to 85 miles per hour on these, but they actually put some stickers on it, so it goes to 125, which I'll show you here. And if you cross over that and go to the 5 mile per hour mark, you're actually going to 135. It's just something that's kind of interesting. You probably wouldn't see that today, obviously. Well, you have all the digital tax and everything, so you're not going to see it today. But it's just something that's unique about these cars. It's also the only front-wheel drive Charger that's actually been produced, which is pretty unique since there's only 1,000 of them. Now, the drivetrain, you didn't get any options either. It came standard with a 5-speed. You didn't have a choice for an automatic. And the engine was based off the Turbo 1 platform, but it had some upgrades. It had longer intake runners, it had a different turbo, and then it had an air-to-air intercooler. Now, the base Turbo 1 setups made about 146 horsepower. This actually makes about 175 horsepower and 175 torque, so it has a pretty good power band. And redline's going to be 5,800 RPM, and peak horsepower seen at 5,300 RPM, and then peak torque is going to be anywhere from 2,200 RPM to 4,800 RPM. So you can see it's right in the middle of the power band, and it really makes a pretty fun street car, especially considering these weigh a little under 2,500 pounds. It's not the fastest thing in the world, but it definitely doesn't feel slow, even by today's standards, especially coming out of the smog era in the 80s. I feel like this would probably be one of the, best cars you could buy per dollar. They were $12,995 new, and including inflation, it brings it to just a little bit under $30,000 today. Going back to performance, I couldn't find an exact quarter mile or 0 to 60 time. I found some ranges, so kind of take these with a grain of salt. But once again, the car's pretty fast for what it is. I don't think you'd be disappointed if you're looking to get one of these. But the 0 to 60 time, I've seen anywhere from about 6.7 seconds to 6.95 seconds. And even by today's standards, once again, not the fastest thing ever, but it's definitely not a slouch. And as far as quarter mile time, I've seen anywhere from 14.7 to about 15.3, which, is pretty respectable for a car from the 80s. Compression on these is about 8.5 to 1, which is a pretty good compression ratio if you're trying to, make power on pump gas. And max PSI is about 12 pounds of boost. And honestly, with only 1,000 of these being produced, you'd kind of be afraid that parts were hard to find. And they're honestly really not too terribly difficult to find. There's going to be a few aftermarket supporters of this platform, which is good. And then there's some forums too if you actually are looking to save some money, possibly get something used, or if there's something that just isn't remanufactured. Some of the vendors or websites, so to speak, that support this platform here are going to be Front Wheel Drive Performance, TurboDodge.com, and then Turbo Unleashed. And as far as forums, if you search Shelby Dodge or Turbo Dodge, those two forums are going to be some of the better forums to find, parts for this, and a lot of information on how to, build these up and maintain them and everything. I would also check here and there on Facebook Marketplace. Once again, it's not a super common car, so they are going to be a little bit harder to find parts on Marketplace or, Craigslist if anyone still uses that. but there are parts out there. If you want a Shelby inspired vehicle, this is probably going to be your best bet as far as affordability. You could pick up a good driver anywhere from about $4,000 to $6,000, and a nice show car for about $7,000 to $8,000. If you want something, you know, super low mileage and stuff, obviously you could spend more money, but about $8,000 is where these top out in today's market. And it's kind of cool to have a car that, you know, the average person, so to speak, could afford, that Shelby has had a hand in building. Honestly, I did look for examples to show you guys of this, and I put it in Marketplace about a 500-mile range, and I checked a couple other major markets on there. I actually couldn't really find anything, so they are kind of hard to come by, so definitely keep your eye out for one of these if you're looking for them. But once again, they're not crazy expensive, and there were some parts cars that came up, you know, for under $3,000. There's one for even $1,500 on there. Obviously, you needed some work, and it's probably going to be hard to find that amount of parts you need to bring it back, but anything's doable if you have the time, energy, and money to do it. Now, as far as this one, this is number 564 out of 1,000. I would be remiss if I didn't bring up that my friend actually has Carroll Shelby's signature on here. And as far as mods on this one, it's pretty close to stock. It has a 2.5-inch catless exhaust, and then it has a manual boost controller, and that's about it. Now, as far as issues with these cars, they actually are pretty reliable for how old they are, but, you know, keep in mind they're a 30-plus-year-old car. There are going to be some issues, especially when it comes to like weather stripping, for example, or shifter bushings, which luckily shifter bushings are remade, so that's not the end of the world. And then one of the other issues that my friend says these have is issues with the head gasket. But once again, you know, 35-year-old head gasket that you're running, you know, boost through, you're probably going to have some issues. The only really issue my friend has had with this was actually the head. All the valves were actually chewed up on this, but everything else was good, so he just bought a used head and put that back on there, and he hasn't had any issues. I think he had a leaky oil pan with it. He took it over to my place and we swapped that out. I mean, maybe took like an hour to get it done, and then you gotta let it sit for a bit, but pretty easy job. And, you know, he's not out there racing this thing, but he doesn't drive it easy at the same time.
At the end of the day, these cars offered an extraordinary amount of fun for the dollar spent. Plus, it's an amazing opportunity for the average automotive enthusiast to own a part of Mopar and Shelby history. They're somewhat hard to come by, but they're definitely worth the wait. And honestly, I had a lot more fun with this thing than I thought I was going to. Have you guys seen these in person or even heard of the Shelby GLHS? Let me know in the comments. If you liked today's video, please consider liking and subscribing. And as always, let me know in the comments if you think there's anything I could improve on. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next one.